My name's Councillor Jane Corbett. You right? My name's Councillor Jane Corbett. I represent the Everton ward, which, anybody know Gracie Market? Hands up who knows Gracie Market. Thank you very much on the back row. Just at the back there, so I've lived there for about 35 years, okay? My job on the council is not only to represent the Everton ward, but also to look after the whole of education and children's services, which is extremely scary. So imagine waking up one morning and being told, there you go, that's your job. You haven't been taught it, you have to do a bit of a wing and a prayer as you're going through. You use transferable skills if you've got them, and you pick the brains of everybody around you and you work collaboratively, otherwise you dive bomb and you won't do it. So, my talk this morning, or this afternoon, or whatever. Okay, so the best of times, the worst of times. Who wrote that? Who wrote the best of times, it's the worst of times? No one know? Thank you. Who said Dickens? Well done. Can't remember which. I think it was Tale of Two Cities, probably. Okay, so the best of times, the worst of times. This is an incredibly interesting and creative time for the city, but it's also absolutely terrifying. I'll start you off with a story, okay? The story is a friend of mine who has been, I don't know whether people are listening or not here. The story is a friend of mine who found that she had extremely bad domestic violence. She basically went into meltdown, and she was put off by the doctor for a very, very long time. She went for what they call a work capability assessment because she was on benefits, okay? She came out from that, and the person actually said in the interview to her, you've got makeup on, you're slightly overweight, okay, you look clean, therefore you no longer need benefits. Now she's got 2 little kids, so she walked out of there and just sat and cried. She had no idea what to do. Luckily, she had family in Liverpool. Now if that had been me in that position, I haven't got family in Liverpool, got mates, so I would have gone round to my mates. She went to her mum and dad and said, what am I meant to do? And they took her straight round to the CAB, Citizens Advice Bureau. And she started to put an appeal in, which she's still waiting for, 6 months later, and she's got 2 little kids. There's literally thousands of people at the moment in Liverpool who are struggling to feed their kids and to keep the houses warm. Okay? So that's one of the worst of times. Some of the best of times you'll see in the pictures coming through, which are that we're actually managing to build a whole load of schools in Liverpool. We have also, from that, you can see we've got the best results in GCSEs ever in the city. So, and 80% of our schools are either judged as good or outstanding. That's the best for any city in the whole country, of all the big cities, okay? Can you still hear me all right? Yeah. School building programme, you'll say, well, okay, fine. So you're looking at big cuts in Liverpool, so how on earth do you manage to do a school rebuilding programme? If you know Great Ormond Street, you'll see Notre Dame going up, which is right by Everton Park Sports Centre. So if you use any of the lifestyles, go along there and have a look at it. What we're doing is, we're selling off pieces of land, and we're using those receipts from that, okay? So we're getting the money in from that. We're adding it at some borrowing, and we're adding it some money that we already have for schools drip-fed through the system. Now, we're not allowed to use that as capital money. We're not allowed to use that money for running things like children's centres. You can only use capital money for capital projects, and you can only use revenue or running costs for running costs, okay? Otherwise, we might have been able to get a decision off the government, but no, they wouldn't even dream of thinking like this, to say for the next 5 years to get us through this storm of cuts. You can actually use capital money for running children's centres, for running family support projects, for putting in more workers into the CAB so we can look at help people as they come through. So we're doing a lovely school rebuilding programme. If you remember, in 2010, you may be aware of the fact that we had a massive rebuild programme ready to go. One of the schools, St John Bosco, the young people there had been working on the plans for 2 years. And suddenly, overnight, the money was pulled. They were just about to sign it off 2 weeks later. The architects were lined up, the contractor was lined up, everything. They were ready to go. And I went in and talked to them, and they said to me, how come people are allowed to take away our dreams? That shouldn't be allowed. And they also said, see that girl walking past, that's our mate, and she had cerebral palsy. She had, you know, like the Zimmer frames on wheels, a little kid of about 14, lovely little girl. She walked past the window down the corridor, and they said, see our mate Amy there, she can't be with us in the classrooms upstairs because we can't get her upstairs. In the new build, she was going to be with us. We miss her and she misses us. Okay, so what we're doing now is we're rebuilding our schools with our money, our way, and every single penny that we're putting aside, because it's our money, remember, every single penny we're putting aside, we're getting apprenticeships out of there, we're getting local jobs and training, we're getting local contractors. So if you look at the Notre Dame scheme, for example, we've got a big, what they call the M&E contract, the mechanical electrical contract, which has gone out to an old Swan firm in Liverpool, which employs about 120 people, and about 110 of those actually live within Liverpool, and they've got a contract now for £3.2 million. So what we're trying to do in Liverpool is do like a mini growth strategy, our own little mini growth strategy, which is what the government should be doing. I'm going to be dead political here because this is big stuff at the moment, and you will stand back, say in 5 years' time, you look back and you say, I remember going to that lecture in December 2012, and the world's changed from then on, okay? It's either going to get worse or it's going to get better. If it hasn't got better by the beginning of March, we are in real problems. So what we're trying to do in Liverpool is say, okay, we are going to get people off the beach because the tsunami's coming and up to higher ground, if we possibly can. And the big problem is that higher ground going to be high enough? Now, I'm hoping to goodness that it is. So every single pound that we put into this big capital rebuild for the schools, for the houses that you'll see, for anything that comes into Liverpool, like the big cruise liner terminal, for the Ellis Island stuff, anything at all, we're trying to make sure that that impacts massively on the people of Liverpool. Because that's my priority, that's the Mayor's priority, that's the Cabinet's priority in the city. Okay? And the other authorities will look after their own people. But this is the time we've got to lock it down and say, right, so anybody that's outside Liverpool coming in, thank you for coming in and helping us out. Anybody that's in Liverpool, work flat out, okay, anybody from Liverpool, because now is the time when we're going to make a difference. If we don't do it right now, we've had it. Okay? And it sounds a bit dramatic, but that actually is the case. Okay, if you then go back and think about, the schools programme that the government is pushing through around academies. Anybody know what UTCs are? Have you heard of UTCs? University and Technical Colleges, free schools, studio schools, all of those type of different schools. And you might think, actually that doesn't matter. As long as your child goes to a school and gets a good education, what does it matter what sort of status or that school has? Now that has a certain amount of truth in it. The problem is that the thinking behind having all those different types of schools is that they're all meant to be islands, not meant to be talking to each other, and meant to be in competition against each other. Now, competition can be healthy, obviously, but too much competition drives people into corners, and you don't get that collaboration, you don't get that local wisdom coming through, and you don't learn of each other, and you don't get models of best practice being shared. So what we've done in Liverpool is we've pulled together what we're calling a Liverpool Learning Partnership, which is every single establishment to do with schools and education round the table. Okay? And Hope have already been along to have a chat with us about that and how that could work. So every school, regardless of whether they're an academy or a free school or a UTC or whatever they are around the table. Why? For the benefit of the children of Liverpool. So if you think that when you're going through your courses, you think, okay, how can my course and my thinking support the city with the children in the middle? And for the first time, I think, for many, many years, or perhaps ever, the schools themselves see themselves as part of the regeneration and the strengthening up of Liverpool. Because we have done incredibly well. If you, who's the oldest? No, that's unfair. I was going to say, who's the oldest person here? I came to Liverpool when I was 17 the first time, which was 1974, so you can work out how old I am. And it was in dire straits. People were hanging on by their fingernails, okay? Through the 80s, we hung on by our fingernails. But for the last sort of 15 years, that sort of time scale, we have absolutely stormed it. And if you can see people have come to Liverpool and they've gone, wow, we love this city. We say, yeah, we love it as well, but welcome. It's a great city. Join in, okay? We're one of the most visited cities outside of London. And if you remember, who went to see the Girl Giant? Anybody see the Girl Giant coming through? Yeah? Big sort of puppet girl made out of a big, absolutely stunning, wasn't it? We put in as a council about £300,000 into that. And you could say, what on earth were you doing that for? We had an economic impact assessment done on that separately, And we basically worked out that the impact on the city was 30 million for 300,000 going in. Nearly every single bed in the whole of the city was taken up. About 99.5% of all the hotels, the bed and breakfast and Costa Coffee ran out of coffee. So that shows the sort of level of people coming into the city, international, but also every single person from across the city was able to come. It didn't matter if you just brought a bottle of water with you because you couldn't afford anything else. It did not matter. And everybody came into the city centre, and that little giant girl came down Breck Road, which is normally left out of anything to do with regeneration, down into Everton Park at the top, into where I live, and we were like made up because suddenly, for a change, things were happening in the North End. Okay, other way. That way, okay. So, some of the worst things happening. Not to scare you, but just to put you in the picture. 4,000 people in Liverpool at the moment are going to food banks. 3 food banks in Liverpool. Do you know what food banks are? You get a voucher if you literally haven't got enough money to pay to get food into your home. This is 2012, remember. Okay? This is not, 1945. This is 2012. We shouldn't be going backwards. We're now going backwards. So 2012, 4,000 people in Liverpool having to go to food banks. 100% increase in the 6 months, January to June. The ones from January to June are literally doubling up. And the people I've talked to who go to the food banks hate going to the food banks. The food bank guys are lovely. They're great. They're volunteers. They're doing the very best they can. Imagine being told, OK, listen, guys, you're going to have to go to the food bank because you haven't got any money to feed your children. You haven't got money to feed you. And it was interesting because not that many people talk to each other when they get the food banks because they don't want to be there. And the trick then is to try and get people together and say, come on, guys, this isn't right, is it? No, it's not. How does it make you feel? Tiny. I don't want to be here. Okay? After you've been for 3 times, you're not really, well, what's meant to happen is almost a red flag goes up and they say, what's happening? You shouldn't be coming back for the 3rd time. Actually, what happens is they're struggling. They shouldn't really be going back for the 4th time. They get them another voucher and they say, whoa, hang on, you're only really allowed 3 vouchers. Okay? And this is some people who've got children, so they're going back home and they're making a choice between either heating their house or feeding their children. Why? 42% of the people that go to food banks have got their benefits that have been pulled on them and they're waiting for them to come back in at the right level and they cannot afford stuff. Now that's extreme. And if you go to some people's houses, you'll look at them and you'll say, but you've got flat screen telly. Yeah, and I went into debt for that some time ago. Or my mum bought it for me for Christmas. But people are getting labelled incredibly badly in Liverpool, in Manchester, in Hull, in Newcastle, in Leeds, in the inner areas of London. Children's centres. I helped set up the first children's centre in Liverpool in Everton. Whole gang of us together. We were made up with that. It works an absolute treat. I have to sit there now and I have to cut half of the budget for the children's centres in Liverpool. So I sit there in the town hall, we have big meetings, and quite rightly, people come in, particularly mothers, and they say, how dare you, Jane, cut the children's centre budgets? And I go, I know, it's appalling. Well, you're doing it. Yeah, but we haven't got the money to be able to spread it out. Well, you shouldn't be doing it like this. You must be able to get it from somewhere else. We've tried. We are trying. So I said to them, we're doing the consultation now. Go back out. Have a think about, we've only got this small pot of money now to spread out. Have a think about the very best way to do it. And they said to me, well, then you're not going to listen to us. I said, yes, I am. I promise you I am. Because my background is community campaigning. That's what we've done in Everton. That's how we've managed to get where we are in Everton. Because people got together and they campaigned and they kept fighting in the right sort of way. So that everybody came back in and we listened to what people were saying. We changed the whole way that we were doing that. Okay? So they actually saw that, yes, we were listening. We tried to do the very best that we can. Bus passes. 16-year-olds. We had to take away and we had to cut the bus passes for 16 to 18-year-olds. These are kids who are perhaps going to a 6th form in another area of the city. Outrageous. Young lad on the front row, James, said to me, Jane, you can't do it. This is in the school's parliament. Okay? Lots of kids. It's absolutely chocker. Hands up. Why you take the bus passes away from us? The travel passes, we need them. So I said, James, we haven't got the money. He said, I'm going to be the first person in my family to get to university. I can't afford to get across the city. So we managed to scrabble together money to keep the kids in that 6th form, if they're in that 1st year, going for the 2nd year with the bus pass so they can continue. I raided it out of basically a pot that was meant to be used for setting up a child poverty strategy. And I said, we can do that anyway. We need to slot this straight in. This is a child poverty issue. So I was just about to allow to do that. James has gone to university and he's doing law and he's doing really, really well. Good on him. But he and a whole load of other young people fought for that. We're still fighting with the young people around that. We're having meetings with Mersey Travel. We're trying to see a way of working through that so that every young person can have a pass that goes right across. NUS, you can get a bus pass pretty cheaply, but also that's at 18. Hopefully we get it at 16. School uniform grants, £20 if you're a family that has a child in primary, about 40 if you're secondary. That's not very much, but people actually depend on that coming through. We're having to pull that as well. Okay? Children in need places, that's for daycare, for children who are really on the edge of stuff, really needing that support. We've had to cut that budget by 60%. Against all of that, the value of welfare benefits and wages are falling and food and fuel costs are rising. Get this right one day. Okay, so major cuts to the city. I can't tell you how bad it is, really, because I need to keep underlining this, because people aren't listening outside of Liverpool. Okay, then they don't understand this. By March 2017, as a council, we would have had a minimum of 52% of our what we call our controllable budget, i.e. we get money in for the schools that comes in one door and goes out the other. We can't use that for things. We can't control that money. The money that comes in that we can control as a council, by the end of March 2017, we would have lost over half of it. Now, if you said, OK, I know Hope University has lost millions of pounds. This is money coming through to look after children, to look after families, to look after adults, to look after vulnerable adults with mental health issues, to get the homeless services up and running, to clean the streets, to run the libraries, to run the leisure centres, all of that stuff, to keep the traffic lights going on red and whatever colour they're meant to go. All of that stuff, we need that money to do that. No city the size of Liverpool with the need levels that we've got can manage that. And we're now looking at whether we think we can get through next year, okay, with the cuts, but the year after that we don't know whether we're actually going to be able to cover our legal duties as a council. Now, other councils across the country aren't getting cut as bad. Bournemouth isn't getting cut as bad. Surrey not getting cut nearly as bad. In fact, in the first year of the cuts, Essex got an increase. Now, how does that work? So across the country, the actual average cut is about 14%. So how come Liverpool has got 52%, which is the highest in the country? Big question there. So if you're into politics, work it out and have a say about it. And then within that includes a massive cut to the children's centres. Again, this year, that money, it's called the EIG grant specifically. Also, you've got the council tax grant, which is changing. We support people who can't pay their council tax grant, their council tax, so they get a grant on that. We're going to have to somehow fill the gap on that, because we know that if we knock on people's doors and say, you owe us more money now, they're not going to be able to pay. So we're probably going to have to cut another 6.5 million to enable people to keep going. Bedroom tax. Anybody heard the bedroom tax? Yeah? Seen it in the papers? No? The bedroom tax basically is if you live in say you've got a 3-bed house and you're dependent on housing benefit. Half the people in paid work depend on housing benefits, okay? If you live in a 3-bed house and say you've got 2 teenagers who grow up and one of them leaves home, and actually you only get money then for the bedrooms that you need. That kid's left. So why on earth would you need to get housing benefit for that? Okay, so you need to move from a 3-bed to a 2-bed. There aren't any 2-beds locally, so where do you go? Speak if you live in Everton, the Wirral, who knows? You have to take your kids with you if you've got little kids still with you. You have to change schools, all of that, okay? So you've got a bedroom tax that is coming in April. There's 9 other benefit changes that are coming in April. And about half of those affect people in paid work. So if you're on low wages, they're going to affect you. Big, big changes. The bottom one is scary, and not many people know this. Legal aid. Okay, the CABs, the Citizens Advice Bureau, are funded so that they can support people to go through their appeals. Okay? Welfare, social welfare law includes appeals for benefit withdrawal. So if you've gone to the benefits agency, if you've gone to the Job Centre Plus and they've told you, sorry guys, you're not actually, you can't have that benefit anymore, and you need to appeal, there isn't going to be the money to appeal because you need specialist people to appeal. It's so complicated. Right, this is Liverpool, and this shows how it is at the moment. It's 2007, but it hasn't actually changed. Do you see where Everton is at the top? sort of circle with a little blue bit in the middle of it. Yeah? That's Everton there. Red is the top 1% most disadvantaged in the whole of the country. So there's about 32,500 tiny little areas across the country. So the top 1% in terms of poverty, including child poverty, is in red. As you can see in Liverpool, there's quite a few little red areas. Speak Garston, you've got Prince's Park, which is Granby, Toxteth, you've got Everton, you've got Vauxhall, which is Kirkdale, you've got some by Norris Green and up by Croxteth, okay? That is a divided city, because if you look at the middle of it, you've actually got Mossley Hill, Chilwell, which aren't anywhere near the disadvantage. So one of the things that we have got to do as a council and as families and as any groups that you're involved with is keep our city together. If you go back to that example of the giant, the Sea Odyssey and the giant coming through the city, everybody came together. That was for everybody. Everybody, Chilwell, Mossley Hill, Everton, it didn't matter where you lived. Everybody piled in together. Everybody went away going, that was brilliant. Now, the more sort of stuff that we can do together, the Sure Start campaigns, the children's centres campaigns, they linked up with each other across the city. People in Mossley Hill, for example, had never had to campaign for stuff. They did a fabulous campaigning job. Absolutely brilliant. And they linked up with people in Everton and Granby and other places. Mothers that they didn't know about, fathers that they didn't know, they'd never met before. So suddenly you get that community cohesion strengthening up when actually it could divide very, very quickly. But determine that it doesn't divide. But that's what it was in 2007. This I showed at the last time I came, but this is really important. This is the missing link, okay? People go on and on about poverty and disadvantage, but this actually is the missing link. Where you've got societies where the income gap between those on the lowest income and the highest income is massive, everything starts to break down. Life expectancy on the left, you'll get this on the website if you look up Equality Trust, okay, .org.uk. Life expectancy is much, much lower in the most divided society in terms of income. Maths and literacy, infant mortality, homicides, imprisonment, teenage births, trust completely breaks down often, obesity increases, that's linked up with stress as well, and also poor diets, that people can't get hold of decent food. Mental illness increases, social mobility stops. And if you look at that, which you can't see this very well, but actually USA is the most divided in the world. You've got Portugal, you've got UK. The most inclusive and balanced societies and equal societies, you've got Japan in there. Very interesting to see the way that Japan responded to their tsunami versus New Orleans. Poor old New Orleans, massively divided society in the US. They were labelled, they were told, why didn't you leave? You should have left. Why didn't you get on a bus and go? Where are we going to go? We don't even own our own homes. We haven't got the money, we haven't got family outside. Japan pulled together because they are a really tight society that looks out for each other, and they haven't got a big income gap because everybody feels that they're part of it together. In the US, people don't feel part of it together. That's the other one. Children experience more conflict in more unequal societies. Okay, UK again at the top. Sweden, Finland, Norway, Denmark, Germany, much, much better. 11, 13 and 15-year-olds fighting bullying and finding peers not kind or helpful. Think about what that does to children's education. You'll know if you were bullied at school how badly you did at that period of time in your education. It just drained the self-worth and self-confidence out of you. Okay, so these are some of the principles. I'm not going to read them all out. These are what we basically learnt in our little community in Everton. So my background is sort of about 30 years of campaigning, really, with everybody in the community. We all just did it together. We got stuck in together. We had 3 fires in a fortnight in our tower block when we lived there. We couldn't get out. There was a whole load of people in there going, what's happening here? So we all piled in together. And as we lost loads of housing in the area because it was all getting demolished against people's will, we fought to get that back up. So it's been a long haul, but we're getting there now. But some of the principles that we've worked, we need people that will work alongside us rather than on behalf of. So if you're going into communities to get stuck in and to support people, come alongside people. Don't go in and say, right, I need to, because they're going, who are you? Where are you coming from? Listen to what people are saying in that community. Serve rather than control. Don't go in and start controlling. Come alongside and serve. Share power rather than take it. Yeah? Vision, share vision rather than impose it. Key one here, if you're living in communities that are under pressure, be there for the long haul, not the short stay. Don't dip in and tick it for a year and say, oh, look, I've worked in Everton for a year, I've worked in Granby for a year, I've worked in Liverpool for a year, and you get it on your CV. Stick in there for a little bit. Hang on in there. Learn off the local communities, okay? Learn what they're saying, learn their lessons, and then see how you can help out. And relationships build up. And then the trust starts to pick back up again. I can think of a health visitor, Frankie Moore, that was in our area for 30 years. She could get into any house, any family in our little patch because people trusted her, because they knew Frankie. And I could be there. Say my mate down the road said, as Frankie was walking past, Frankie, because she used to walk everywhere as well, so she was always visible, Frankie, go and knock on Jane's door, she's struggling, you know. So Frankie might come to my door and go, oh, how's it doing? I just wondered how your little Emma's getting on now. And I would ask her in because I trust her. If someone knocks on the door and says, I'm that local health visitor, I'm come to check up on you, you go away. Yeah? Strong relationships. Manage. This is the massive one for now. I'm standing here ranting at you. How do we turn the conflict that we're in at the moment into positive action? Okay? Now, if people know their history, Martin Luther King did non-violent direct action. And he had a lovely phrase called using tough minds and tender hearts, which is actually from the verse about when Jesus said to the disciples, go out and be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. And he made that into ordinary everyday language. He said, you've got to have tough minds and tender hearts. And I find when I'm getting too aggressive, I say, hang on a minute, I need a tender heart here. And when I'm getting too soft, I go, but you've got to watch people like a hawk, because they'll start to undermine stuff. Build partnerships built on trust, mutual respect. Never ever in your head as you're going past label anybody in your head. It's so easy to do, either up or down. Always say, these guys are made, if you're a Christian, these guys are made in God's image. They're just as important as me, or they're more important, or whatever it is, but they're on the level. If you're not a Christian, just remember, or you haven't got faith, just remember, those guys that you're looking at are on the level. Treat them on the level, and have tough minds, tender hearts, okay? Right, so that's the negatives. So you can calm down now. I'll calm down a bit. What we're doing, though, on the schools, who's actually doing education? Who's doing any education stuff? Okay, so quite a few of you. So the environment that you're teaching in is really, really important. Now, we could have said, you know what, the government have pulled all the money away. We're just going to have to, you know, school buildings aren't actually very important. When I listened to the young people at St John Bosco, I said to them, do you think the new build was going to make a difference? They went, yeah, because it would help our learning styles. And I thought, whoa, I wish somebody when I was at school had told me what my learning style was. I'm a visual learner, and I have to understand the big picture, otherwise I get lost. So my daughter says I'm some sort of theorist. So big picture, I've got to understand it, see where I am up to, and visual thinker, now visual learner. So I'm no good if someone just stands up and reels stuff off at me and says, as they did when I was learning, the history teacher, I remember, Mr. Burnham, his name was, and he wrote on the blackboard, and we literally just had to copy out what he'd written. I can't remember any of that stuff. It just went in one eye, if you like, and out the other. So what we're doing on the schools is we're building schools that can support people's learning styles. So they can have breakout sessions. They can go and do some research. They can do some audio stuff and doing little radio interviews with each other. They can do some visual stuff and put it on the book. They can do discussion groups, okay? And in the one in Notre Dame, which is our first one on site, it's a beautiful, this is what it's going to look like inside. So you've got what they call a big roof concept, and inside of that it's like buildings within a building. So as time changes, we future-proofed it so that if we need to change the style that people learn in and how we're teaching, we can do that. You can take down some of these little units over the summer holidays and replace them if you've got the money, as opposed to waiting 18 months while you're knocking things down and getting people off site and changing it around. But these ones are also going into, as far as we can, we're going to the regeneration areas of Liverpool, so they support the regeneration areas of Liverpool. So everything interlinks, okay? We're going to try and get the library in there. We've had to close the library down on Great Ormond Street. It's the one place locally where people could access the internet because people haven't got broadband in their houses. So we're going to try and get that somehow back into the school so everybody can share it. And we're doing it at less cost per square metre and square foot than the government are doing their cheapest ways of doing their new build. So we're actually doing it really well. Linked to growth strategies as well, which I'll explain in a minute. That's the inside, if you like, and it backs out onto the park. So we've done up some of the stuff at the back. We've linked up with the sports centre next door, try and keep the sports centre alive. So it's got the music hub in there. Who does music?
Anybody do music, performing arts and music? Yeah. We've got the Music Hub in there, which will link up with the El Sistema project. Do you know about that? In Harmony, Julian Lloyd Webber, every child in Faith Primary learning a musical instrument, all together, including the head teacher, the school secretary, all doing it together, and they play in the Philharmonic, get taught by the Philharmonic guys as well. Okay, just to rapidly finish for you. There are big, this is still the positives, okay? Finish with the negatives. This is the positives. There's a big report done by Michael Heseltine and Terry Leahy, and it's called Rebalancing Britain. And they've looked at the growth areas of the city. And they've come out with, this is independent research, they've come out with these areas where we think that over the next 10 years, that's where the growth and the jobs will be. So the trick will then be, how can we educate our children, not to be factory fodder for stuff, but actually to have such a broad and wide curriculum and be so full of confidence and bubbly and creative and able to market stuff and have analytical thinking and have very good English and maths and do philosophy in schools, for example, all of that question stuff. How can we get them to a position where they're going to be able to benefit from these big growth areas in Liverpool? Now, if you take out one of them, if you look at the knowledge economy, okay, you take out one of them, professional or financial, 22,000 jobs could come in the next 10 years, all right? Now that means that, hang on a minute, come on guys, that's it. We're drawing up a model which we think is going to work, and it's that in the new builds that we're doing across the city, in some of those we're going to have what we call a professional hub. And that professional hub will pick up one of the professions that's linked up with that growth strategy. I'm looking at the financial sector at the moment. Now, obviously, you know, the crash happened. Do we really want the crash to happen again? Shouldn't wealth management be done better? Shouldn't the banks get their act together? Shouldn't there be some integrity in the middle of that? Shouldn't there be some honesty and some truth and some listening to each other and some social justice in the middle of that? So the idea is that we have one school named, which will, in this case will be Archbishop Beck. We have one big lead organisation and employer, which will almost certainly be Rathbones Investment Bank, which goes back to 1700 and something or other in Liverpool. It's a fabulous investment bank. And then we have the professional organisation that links up with that profession, linked up with us as well. So you get those three people working together. And in this case, I went down to London with one of the guys from Archbishop Beck, who runs the apprenticeship scheme there, and we talked to the Chartered Institute of Securities and Investment, who are the guys that accredit all the guys that are working in the banks. And the woman there, they set up an education trust. The woman there is fabulous. She set up a course called Integrity Matters. These are all the bankers, okay? And if you're part of the Chartered Institute, which you should be, you have to take that course. So you then see, okay, when I'm on the trading floor, when I'm doing credit derivatives and I'm doing whatever I'm doing, I need to be aware of actually how this works, because integrity does matter. What's the impact? And then what we're going to be doing with those people is that particular woman has set up a little AS course with some modules on it. If the and this will be offered across the city, not just via one school. So that school will lead it and they'll offer it across the city. So if any of our young people, 16, 17-year-olds, want to take that module, it's got UCAS points to it as well. So they take that alongside what they're doing in terms of A-levels. We might be able to have it so they can learn the lessons in one of the big investment bank boardrooms, which should be quite fun rather than in the school. And then at 18, if they're not going to uni, or they decide that they're not going to uni, they can actually get on an apprenticeship scheme then at 18 with one of those big wealth management or financial services guys at a decent wage, because the strap line that we've come up with, which Paul particularly came up with, the teacher there, was Liverpool children becoming Liverpool's professionals. Now, why shouldn't the kids of Everton and Granby and Speke and Norris Green be on £50,000 a year jobs in wealth management? Good on them, because they will then have and understand how money works. Because what we'll do is, and the positive impact that that can have, what we'll do alongside of that, which is what I'm saying at the bottom, is we will spin that right back to early years, primaries and secondary, and say, okay, let's have a little go at what happened with why did the crash happen? Why did no one in the credit rating agency put up their hand and say, I haven't got a clue what these new guys are coming up with, what they're doing with these financial packages? Oh no, they gave them 3-star ratings and said, that must be fine. So the insurance guy said, that must be fine. Actually, it was a load of rubbish. And they knew that. They were spinning emails around to each other saying, watch this one, we'll put that one in, that'll crash and I'll bet against it. They were making money whichever way it went. Okay? So we're going to change the world from the inside out with our young people, and we're going to make sure that they're in good value jobs. So if you're in schools and you come up and you see some of this stuff, say you do philosophy in schools, say we manage to do that, philosophy for children across every primary school in Liverpool, you're then going to get kids in the primary schools who are going to start to put up their hands and ask questions, look at concepts, do some analytical thinking, be able to debate either side of the argument. Imagine them then coming through to secondary school and then having their heads up and going, I tell you what, I didn't know, I know all about the crash, I understand what happened with money. Quite interested about money actually, but actually I'd like to start my own business. Go to the enterprise competition that we're running through schools at the moment. Join up with a business school, see how you can set up a little business. But have a think about a living wage. Do you really want everybody on minimum wage and you on a big fat wage on the top of the company? Or is that going to divide the company? So you're starting then to get kids to think completely from very, very early on. How does society work? What are power relationships? How does that work for them? How can we rebuild as well the city? This is my favourite verse, okay, because when it gets really hard, I think, okay, guys, what are we actually here for? That's Micah, if you're interested, Micah 6:8. Because do you remember Obama when he did all his great speeches and everything? I've changed it to together we can, okay? He said, yes, we can. Together we can. Because if we do it together, we're going to get there. If we do it on our own, we're going to fail. And we must do it together, but how? And I've put, what does the Lord require of you? To do justice, i.e. to fight for social justice, to do it properly, to think about the impact on this, treat everybody on the level. Love mercy, i.e. do it with kindness. So apologise if I was shouting out at people and getting them thinking, who is this woman? But try and, do it with kindness. Give people a second chance. Ask for forgiveness if it's me. I go, I'm really sorry, guys, I was out of order. Do it like that as well. And walk humbly. Because quite often, and this is a big temptation for people in power, of any sort of power, if there's a hierarchical structure, you get a buzz from being in power. You should get a buzz from serving whoever you're meant to be serving and working alongside. And I check myself every so often. If I'm getting a bit of a buzz from, standing out and giving you a lecture, I'm thinking, okay, is that useful or not? Is that helpful? How does that work in terms of having a society that works around the table, a flat structure where everybody is welcome? So everybody feeds in. So you never lose anything, any bit of wisdom or any bit of understanding. You put all that around the table together. So that's me anyway. Okay. So back row question.
Yes, I've got questions coming in here.
Oh, have you? Okay.
One of the questions is, are you Labour or Conservative?
Oh, what? I'm Labour. And I'll tell you why I'm Labour, to be honest with you, because when I first came to Liverpool, I had never ever seen adults being treated so badly. And when I looked and scanned around, it was actually the Labour Party at that stage. Having said that, then you look in the mid-80s and Labour was so-called in control of the city. They weren't. They'd been overtaken by another political party, really, militant tendency, who were Trotskyists. So if you know your politics, when on earth would you normally get a Trotskyist-run council in an English city? So yes, I'm Labour, yeah. However, I've got mates who are Tories and Lib Dems.
Okay, the other question is, do you think there are big public works would fix our problem?
Big public works, in terms of borrowing and infrastructure, it would certainly help. And that's what we're trying to do in our little mini growth strategy. Because if you go back and you look at history and how economics works, if you go to the left-thinking economic guys like Paul Krugman and Skidelsky and all of them, or versus the right-wing ones like Friedman and them, if you go over the left-hand side, what they're saying is you can borrow now very, very cheaply. So if the government wanted to borrow money very cheaply now, you could do big infrastructure works and public works and get people into work, and then they would pay their taxes, and that money would come back, and the welfare bill would start to come down, and people's heads would go back up. Future Jobs Fund, we took some people on in the Future Jobs Fund under the last Labour government. It worked an absolute treat. We still got some of those people in work. So yes, but the mantra coming out, and you'll listen to it on the telly, is you don't, what do they say, you shouldn't borrow when the borrowing's so high. Actually, if you look at the economic theory, there is an argument to say that's exactly the time when you should borrow. And then what you do is you spin it out over 30, 40 years. National Health Service came at a time, straight after the Second World War, where we were bankrupt. Up came the National Health Service, set in there for every single person in the country, the same service for everybody, and you spread out the borrowing right the way through, and it's held.
The other question is...
Are they not allowed to ask questions?
yes, you are.
Oh, okay, go on.
Yes.
Give us one more. Go on, Alex.
I've got another one here. Is how do you help those who don't want to help themselves?
How do you help those who don't want to help themselves? You don't. You just... You're around. Sometimes I don't want to help myself. Sometimes people say, you're working too hard, you need to go to bed early. I'm thinking, yeah, I know, but, you know, I won't listen. Or get yourself some decent food down you. And sometimes, you know, I'll crash and then somebody will say, come on, Jane, get your act together, will you? So sometimes I can't help myself either and need somebody alongside me. You can't, but what you can do is just be there with people. And if you're together in a group and you're sharing stuff out, then actually sometimes people then say, oh, okay, I'll join in there. It's fine. Offer stuff out. Same for, you know, people on top wages. Why are they wasting money on stuff that actually is damaging the environment? Try and help those that help them, you know, they should learn that lesson. They should have learned that a long time ago.
Alan?
Go on, Alan.
Hi, Jane. Thanks for the passionate lecture. Really enjoyed it. Bear with me on this one.
Go on.
Conservative government,
Yeah,
coalition snap election,
yeah,
Labour get voted in,
yeah,
you're asked to be Minister of Education.
yeah.
What would be the first thing you want to change and why?
I would want to say, first of all, that we need a structure that goes a much wider curriculum. So I'd say Gove is coming right in for a very, very narrow curriculum. Bad news. Widen it right out again and do it so that it's in depth. Read, if people are interested in this, read the CBI report, that they've just, the CBI, okay, which is all the big businesses. It came out in September, October, I think. And it says you must have a broad and wide curriculum. What's the government doing? Narrowing it right down. I would also make sure that we do not have this labelling of academic versus vocational, because all that does is says, say I'd failed my 11 plus, because we had 11 plus there. My older brother failed his 11 plus. I passed mine. Now, if I'd have failed mine, I would have gone to the secondary modern school down the road, and immediately I would have felt that big. Would I have had my head up and absolutely piled in there? Of course I wouldn't. So in terms of pulling everybody together, having a very, very broad and wide curriculum, but also just thinking that education actually is meant to be going through life. So stop going academic vocation, go theory practice all the time. Now, I bet you, if I asked you in 10 minutes' time or whatever, come up with an example where you're doing theory and practice. So you go into a classroom and you're doing the practice. And as you're sitting there, you think, do you know what, I really want to have a think about, and it might be the theory about how children learn or communication. So you come back and you do that theory, and then you go back in and you do the practice. That last verse that I put up, my theology, people say to me, is your theology based on theory or practice? I go, both. Because every time I'm hitting my, you know, every time I've got my back up against the wall, I go, okay, what does the Bible say? Or if you're in a situation, or what does politics say? What does the history of politics say? What did the Labour Party do last time? So I'd do a broad and wide curriculum. I would say theory and practice. I would say, okay, I wouldn't change the status of the schools, because that's neither here nor there now. What I would say is, though, that the local authorities, as in the councils, do have a role, because the government is saying we don't, collaboratively with the likes of the universities, the likes of all the schools working together. So you get that collaboration, not just competition, which makes a massive amount of difference. And also you've got a universal, I think there's basically three things that you need. You need a certain level of autonomy for schools. We've got that already, not total autonomy. You need a comprehensive style of education where everybody's included, and you need collaboration. If you go back over the government, what are they saying? They're saying total autonomy, and they're saying divide and rule, not together for everybody, and they're saying competition versus collaboration. So they're going against the grain. Is that okay? Why do you think we got the highest cuts? Is that what you said? Yeah. I think if you look at the spread, there's also if you go on the Guardian website, there's a map that shows the spread of the cuts across the country. The big northern cities are getting hit massively, and the inner areas of London, so the leafy suburbs in cheap language, are getting much less. I think partly because it's a political decision. Well, I know it's a political decision, because Liverpool did incredibly well out of Labour, out of the last Labour government. We got billions, whereas places like Surrey and Essex hardly. They still got money, They still got a reasonable amount of money, but they didn't get as much as us. Because what the government did is they based it on need. What this government had done is they'd taken the need element out, put that on the side and said, OK, per head of population, we'll spread it. But even if you just do per head of population, we're still getting targeted. So I think the nicest version is that they want to make the northern cities and the inner areas of London stand on their own 2 feet. Well, that doesn't hang out either, because why would you say everybody's got to have cuts and then give Essex more in the first year and Dorset more? But why would that? Sorry, it was Dorset more and Essex had 0.1% cuts. So Dorset got a 1% increase. So I think it's highly, highly political, sadly. And, yeah, we are getting some money. We're getting it through the likes of Heseltine, who actually is a Tory, as you know. Joe, the mayor, gave him freedom of the city, which means that because Heseltine loves Liverpool to bits. So we've actually got a Tory, a left-wingish Tory, in government going, don't you dare screw Liverpool and Manchester and Leeds and Sheffield. But yeah, that's the big question. And that, when did you ever hear that out in the newspapers? You know, you see it in the Guardian. Well, Guardian's a charity. They can afford to put those things out.
Do those cuts map out with the, let's say, Labour and
Yep.
Conservative strongholds?
Yeah, absolutely spot on. Yeah, they do. Yeah. Did you hear that, what Alex said? That the maps actually reflect the political... So Labour gets hit massively hard. Tories, hardly at all or an increase. And I think what my daughter works down in London. She works for... anyway, she does work down in London. I forget I'm getting recorded. And she raised with one of the ministers, because she was in a meeting around children, she raised with one of those who said, do you realise that Liverpool particularly is getting... Because he said, oh, you sound like you come from Liverpool. She's got a really strong Scouse accent, which she's very proud of. He said, what do you mean Liverpool's getting battered? And she said, we're going to... 52% of our... Well, you need to get hold of the Cabinet Member for Education and Children's Services and tell them to sort it out and to prioritise children. And she said, yeah, that's my mother. And she cries sometimes at night because she cannot get this right, because we haven't got enough money in Liverpool to sort this out. No, no, no. She said 52% of the budget, controllable budget, gone by March 17. And he said, no, that's a lie. And she said, no, it's not a lie. Actually, these are the real figures. So some of the guys in government are thinking that this isn't as bad as it is. And that's really a big... If anybody's doing media... You've got to get the big discussions out there. That's where, the public square. You do that debate. You have those conversations, and that's what's missing as well. Any other questions? Or any other ideas? Have you got any ideas for us?
Stop sending so much money out of the country.
Sorry?
Stop sending so much money out of the country.
Out of the country. So where to? Atos.
There's so many times when things could be made in Britain,
Yep.
but instead of going, oh, it's cheaper in China, or it's cheaper in...
Good point. Good point.
So many times when you think that, you look at, for example, Germany after World War I,
Yep.
they didn't buy anything in 3 years.
Yep.
Everything they did themselves. They went from the worst in the world to the best.
Yeah, they did. And they invested massively in their manufacturing base. What we've done is we've changed what we call our procurement strategy, our buying-in strategy, okay, in the council. And we've changed it to say we want people to look at a Liverpool living wage that immediately says, hang on a minute, why are you buying from people in sweatshops in India, for example, okay? Liverpool living wage, what's your income differential? What's your gap? How much profit are you making? You start asking all those questions. Are you doing apprenticeships? Are you doing skills? And we then start to measure them against that. So we're not going to... We don't think we're going to get challenged on our legals on pushing the schools out to say we've got our target is 60% of our spend should be in Liverpool, 70% in the region. That's a target that we're aiming for. We're already at 59% for Notre Dame, and we think we'll be over 60% by that time. So that's our target. And you can do that. You have to be really careful, obviously, because you've got EU laws and everything about procurement, but we think that we can do that. And then if we're also saying that if you look at the economy, and we're very much heavily based on getting money in from the financial sector, actually our manufacturing base is good, but it needs strengthening. Why aren't people being able to borrow from the banks? One idea is that actually the Bank of England puts the money directly into the businesses. What they don't do is send it via the banks, and the banks go, oh, you're telling us to keep more in the banks and not have risky loans, so we're not going to lend. So can we do it so we actually increase our manufacturing base? We've got some of the best creative geniuses in the world in Britain. You know, they come up with fantastic stuff. Engineers, people coming up with all sorts of ideas. The R&D here is great, and then the manufacturing is elsewhere. So yeah, spot on. Any other ideas? You look like you had loads of ideas there, you guys sitting there. No? No? Okay. Anybody else? Any other ideas? Have a think. It was very interesting that some of the young people got together and said, "Why you mustn't take money out of children's services until you've taken it out of the arts." And we said, okay. So we had a debate with them then, and we said, and we gave the £300,000 example of bringing 30 million into the city. And the young people were spot on. They go, yeah, but that's not coming to the council to pay for children's centres, that's going to the businesses. So then it comes back to your question, how can we link that up so that actually it comes to Liverpool businesses who pay business rates, who comes back into the city, and council tax that comes back into the city. So how do you do that linkaging so that every time, every pound that we put in for anything has a massive social value? And if you're interested in that stuff, there's a Social Value Act that's just come through and that's being enacted at the moment. Check that out, because we're allowed to do things with social impact, and that was across all three parties. So again, that picks up your point about, can we have that locally, because we need to see the local impact. So we're getting there. We're getting there. Can I go now, please, sir? Okay, thanks for listening.
Thank you, Jen.